You'll need to move your things to the attic." My daughter-in-law, Brenda, didn't even look at me as she said it, just pointed toward my armchair. She was already in her expensive athletic gear, planning her workout. "This room is perfect for the new Peloton," she said. "It just looks cluttered in here." I looked past her shoulder to my son, Mark. He was standing right there in the hallway, staring at his phone, pretending not to hear. He said nothing. I was being kicked out of my room. Anyone 64 for an exercise bike. After everything I had sacrificed for them, after giving them the keys to this very house, this was my reward. But that explosion was just the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for months. To understand how we got here, you need to see what I gave up. What I gave up wasn't just a house. It was my life. It all started 6 months ago, on a gray Tuesday. The chill in the air had just started to bite, the kind of day that makes you want to pull on a thick sweater and put the kettle on. I was in my kitchen, in the bungalow my late husband, David, and I had bought 40 years ago. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The mortgage was paid off. The counters were old Formica, but I knew every nick and stain by heart. The whole place still held a faint, comforting smell of David's pipe tobacco and the lemon polish I used every Friday. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. Not yet. Then Mark and Brenda pulled into the driveway in their new, shiny SUV. Mark, my only son, and Brenda, his wife, a woman who always seemed to be moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, her phone permanently attached to her hand. They came in bearing a fancy, store-bought coffee cake in a pink box, the kind that costs $20 and tastes like air. "Mom, so good to see you." Mark hugged me, a quick, one-armed squeeze before he let go to answer a buzz from his phone. Brenda kissed the air near my cheek. "Eleanor, this place is just so cozy." The way she said cozy made it sound like tiny or old. We sat at my kitchen table, the one David had refinished himself. They made small talk for exactly 3 minutes before Brenda pulled out her laptop. "Okay, so we didn't want to just call, because this is so exciting we had to tell you in person." She turned the screen toward me. On it was a real estate listing for a huge, sprawling house that looked like it was falling down. The paint was peeling, the porch was sagging. "It's a fixer-upper," Mark said, his voice buzzing with an energy I hadn't heard in years. Brenda took over, her words coming fast. "It's in the best school district, Eleanor. The absolute best. The kids would have access to everything. AP classes, the best sports teams. It's our forever home, a place to build a legacy." I just nodded, looking at the pictures. It looked like a money pit. A beautiful, expensive money pit. "It's lovely, dears, but it looks like a lot of work." "That's the charm," Brenda said. "We'll gut it, open up the floor plan, new kitchen, new everything." Then Mark, who never could balance a checkbook when he was young, started talking about equity and market comps. He sounded like he was reading from a script. And then, the silence. The heavy, calculated pause before the real reason for the visit. Mark cleared his throat. "So, here's the thing, Mom. We've been pre-approved for the mortgage. But the 20% down payment, it's just..." He looked at Brenda. "It's a lot," she finished, her voice suddenly soft and sympathetic. "With the market the way it is, to get into a district like this, the bar is just so high. We're short. We're about, well, we're $150,000 short." The number just hung there in my quiet kitchen. $150,000. It was an impossible sum. They knew I didn't have that kind of cash sitting in a bank account. They knew my pension was just enough. They knew that money was buried in the only thing I had left in the world, the very house we were sitting in. My hand tightened around my coffee mug. I looked around my living room. I saw the nick on the doorframe where Mark had measured his height, stopping at 6 feet when he was 18. I saw the worn floral armchair where David had sat every single night, reading his history books. This house was my security. This was the nest David and I had built, feather by feather. When I lost him, it was like the anchor chain on my life had been cut. This house was the only thing keeping my boat from drifting out to sea. Brenda must have seen the hesitation in my eyes. She leaned forward, placing her perfectly manicured hand on my arm. Her voice was a purr. "And Mom, the best part, it has a perfect in-law suite, a whole separate apartment over the garage. Your own entrance, your own little kitchen. We wouldn't just be buying a house, we'd be building a family. All of us, together. Imagine, seeing the grandkids every single day. No more driving over here just for Thanksgiving. That was the hook. She knew my weakness. The fear of being the old woman in the bungalow, the mother who waited by the phone, the grandmother who only saw her grandkids on holidays. She was offering me a daily pass into their lives. She was offering me a reason to wake up in the morning. You'd really want me to live with you? Of course, Mark said, his face bright with relief. It wouldn't be the same without you, Mom. I looked from his hopeful face to Brenda's beaming, expectant smile, and I made the decision that would unravel my entire life. I could sell this place, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's paid off. It should be more than enough to cover your down payment. The relief in that room was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. The hugs were suffocating. You're a lifesaver, Mom, Mark yelled, lifting me off my feet. You're making our dreams come true. 2 weeks later, the for sale sign went up on my lawn. It sold in a day. The packing was the hardest part. How do you pack 40 years? You don't. You just throw pieces of your heart into cardboard boxes. I stood in the garage, the last place to be cleared out. I ran my hand over David's workbench. I picked up his favorite hammer, the wooden handle worn smooth and dark, perfectly molded to a hand that was no longer there. I carefully wrapped his set of chisels in an old, oil-stained rag. My hands were shaking. I was a bookkeeper. I understood assets and ledgers. I knew, on paper, this was a simple transaction, selling one asset to invest in another. But in my heart, I knew I was doing something terribly, terribly wrong. I wasn't just packing tools. I was packing David. I was packing the last part of my identity. I sealed the box, my neat, careful handwriting on the label, David's workshop tools. I was sealing away my entire past, all for the promise of a future that, I would soon find out, was a lie. That promise was supposed to be finalized a week later at the title company. The room was sterile, all gray walls and beige carpet that smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and new toner. A mountain of paperwork sat in the middle of a polished mahogany table, waiting for us. Brenda was vibrating with impatience, tapping her lacquered nails on the arm of her chair and checking her phone every 30 seconds. She was already talking about which contractor to call first, which walls to knock down. Mark just looked overwhelmed. His eyes glazed over as the closing agent droned on about escrow and pro rata taxes. I, on the other hand, was calm. For 40 years I was a bookkeeper. I'd spent my life making sure ledgers balanced, that every debit had a credit. My world was one of numbers, of quiet certainty, of things adding up, and this didn't add up. Giving away my entire nest egg, my security, for a vibe, for a promise, it felt like an unbalanced equation. I waited until the agent had explained the last of the bank's documents. Then, as the agent was shuffling pages, I reached into my own purse, the old, structured leather one David had given me for my 50th birthday, and pulled out a single, neatly folded paper. I had typed it up myself. I slid it across the table. "What's this?" Brenda asked, her voice sharp. She hadn't expected this. "It's just for my records," I said softly, my voice quiet in the hushed room. "It's a promissory note for the loan, just a formality so my books are balanced." Brenda picked it up like it was a dirty napkin. She scanned it. I watched her eyes narrow. "A loan? Eleanor, we're family. This is weird." "It's just procedure, dear," I said, my voice unwavering. $150,000 is a significant sum. It needs to be accounted for. It's how my brain works. "It's not a loan, it's an investment," Brenda countered, her smile tight and false. "We're investing in our future, together." "Of course," I said, not smiling back, "and this document just outlines the terms of that investment." Mark, who just wanted the whole thing to be over so he could get the keys, grabbed the paper from her. "Bren, it's fine. It's just how Mom is. She's meticulous." He gave me a look, half annoyed, half pleading. "Don't make this difficult." He barely glanced at the text. He just grabbed a pen, scribbled his name at the bottom, and pushed it toward Brenda. "Mark, really," she hissed. "It doesn't matter. It's just a piece of paper," he whispered back, exasperated. "Let's just get this done. I want to get to the house before the demo crew arrives." With a dramatic sigh and a roll of her eyes at the closing agent, Brenda signed her name with a flourish, her signature a sharp, angry scrawl. I took the paper back. I handed a second copy, which I had also brought, to the closing agent. "Would you be so kind as to notarize both copies as part of the closing package?" The agent, a professional woman who had seen everything, simply nodded, stamped both copies with a heavy, satisfying thunk, and handed one back to me. I folded it carefully. As I slipped it back into my purse, my fingers brushed against the embossed text. I knew exactly what it said, because I had typed it myself, sitting at my old desk, the box of David's tools at my feet. I had thought of his words, "Always read the fine print, Ellie, and if you're the one with the money, you're the one who writes it." So I had. I thought about the clause I had added under terms of repayment, a little piece of bookkeeping I'd pulled from my old corporate days. Section 4B. It felt like a shield, a tiny paper-thin shield against a future I couldn't quite see, but one I was already starting to fear. Brenda stood up, all bright smiles again now that the formality was over. "Well, that's that. Let's go get the keys to our new life." Mark clapped me on the shoulder, his relief palpable. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." I just nodded, clasping my purse. The ledger was balanced. The transaction was complete, and I had my copy. I hoped, more than anything in the world, that I would never, ever have to look at it again. But I'm a bookkeeper. I know you always keep your receipts. You never know when you'll need to prove a return. I just never thought I'd have to prove a return. Move-in day was pure chaos. The fixer-upper was less fixer-upper and more war zone. The air was thick with drywall dust that coated my tongue, and the constant shriek of a tile saw upstairs made my teeth ache. Contractors were yelling over each other, and the whole house had a sharp, damp smell of paint and plaster. It was the absolute opposite of my quiet, settled bungalow. But I kept smiling. I was part of the team, here to help. This was our new life. Mark, my son, gave me a sweaty hug as I walked in. "Mom, you're here. Welcome home." He seemed stressed, a clipboard in his hand, but he was smiling. Brenda, on the other hand, was in her element. She was dressed in crisp white jeans and a hard hat she was clearly wearing as an accessory, directing the movers like a general. "No, no, no. The entryway console goes there. Be careful with the finish." She clapped her hands and turned to me, her smile bright and brittle. "Eleanor, perfect. Let's get you settled." I picked up my small suitcase, the one I'd packed with my essentials for the first few nights. "Great. I can't wait to see the suite over the garage. Your description of it sounded just lovely." Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh as if I'd told a joke. "Oh, honey, no. We had a major change of plans. Mark has to have a dedicated, quiet workspace for his Zoom calls. You know how it is. It's just not practical to put you all the way up there so far from the family." My smile wavered. "Oh, so where?" "We found a much cozier spot for you. It's so much more convenient." She led me past the grand, curving staircase, through the brand new kitchen, which was already larger than my entire old living room, and down a short, dark hallway I hadn't even noticed during the walkthrough. It was tucked behind the pantry. She pushed open a door. The room was a box. I don't mean that as an exaggeration. It was a box. It had clearly been a large pantry, or maybe a maid's room from the 1942nd. The only window was a tiny, high-up square that looked directly at the neighbor's peeling beige siding, letting in a gray, flat light. "See," Brenda said, her voice painfully cheerful. "It's so efficient. Right next to the kitchen, so you're close to all the action." She opened another door inside the tiny room, revealing the back of a washer and dryer. "And look, it's attached to the laundry room. You won't have to haul your things all over the house. Isn't that thoughtful?" I just stood there. The thump-thump-thump of the washing machine, which was already running, vibrated through the thin wooden floor. This wasn't an in-law suite. This was storage. This was a utility closet they'd thrown a cot into. The in-law suite had its own kitchen, I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, but why would you need that?" Brenda said, tilting her head. "You have this brand new, gorgeous kitchen right outside the door. We'll be eating together, as a family." Just then, two movers appeared in the narrow hallway, struggling with the last, most important piece of my furniture, David's armchair. It was an old, floral-patterned recliner, a bit worn on the arms, but the fabric was clean. It was the chair my husband had sat in every single night for 30 years to read his history books. It was the chair I had curled up in after he passed, wrapping myself in his old, knitted afghan, just to feel close to him. It was my one piece of comfort I had insisted on bringing. It was my home. "Where do you want this, ma'am?" one of the movers asked, grunting. Before I could answer, Brenda stepped in front of me, her hand held up. Just put it down right there in the hall for a second." They set it down, and it looked huge and out of place, blocking the narrow passage. At that exact moment, another set of movers came through the front door, carrying an enormous object wrapped in layers of plastic. It was a sofa, a giant beige modular thing that looked like a collection of marshmallows. It was so big they could barely get it through the door. "Ah!" Brenda squealed, clapping her hands. "The Restoration Hardware Cloud sofa. Finally, it's here." She ran over, directing them with the precision of an air traffic controller. "In the great room, people. Center it on the fireplace." She turned back, her face flushed with excitement, and her eyes landed on David's chair. Her smile instantly vanished. It was like she'd just seen a cockroach. "Eleanor," she said, and she was trying to sound gentle, like she was explaining something to a child. "I've been looking at the color swatches for the great room, and that thing, it just clashes with the entire aesthetic." "It was my husband's chair," I said. My voice was tight. I could feel my hands, hanging at my sides, clench into fists. "I know, honey, and that's so sweet," she said, patting my arm. "But we have to be practical. It's just so brown and patterned. It's going to suck all the light out of the room. The vibe we're going for is modern farmhouse, and that chair is, well, it's just old." "I can put it in my room," I said, my voice flat. I already knew the answer. Brenda glanced at the tiny box-like room, then back at the bulky chair. She let out that little laugh again. "Eleanor, you wouldn't be able to open the door. You'd have to climb over it to get into bed." She flagged down Mark, who was jogging by with a box. "Mark, honey, can you and the movers take that up to the attic? It'll be safe up there. We'll find a place for it later." "The attic," I said. The word came out sharper than I intended. Mark looked at the chair. He looked at me. He looked at Brenda. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was tired. He was covered in sweat. He didn't want to fight. He just wanted the day to be over. "Mom, it's okay," he said, not quite meeting my gaze. "It's just for now. Once we get settled and the renovation is done, we'll find a better spot for it. I promise." I didn't say anything. I just stood there and watched my son, the boy I had raised in the house. This chair came from instruct two strangers to haul the last piece of his father, the last piece of my home, up a set of rickety pull-down stairs into a dark, dusty, uninsulated attic. I heard the thud as they set it down on the rafters above my head. I stood alone in the dark hallway, clutching my purse. In the great room, I could hear Brenda laughing as she tore the plastic off her new $10,000 beige sofa. The first promise was broken, the in-law suite was a lie, and I was standing in a house that my money had paid for, and there wasn't a single place for me. Not one. I was just another old, brown, vintage thing that clashed with the new aesthetic, to be hidden away in the dark. And it turns out, hidden wasn't even the right word. Useful was. I woke up that first morning in my little box of a room, my back already aching from the thin mattress on the cot. The thump, thump, thump of the laundry, which Brenda had apparently started at 6 a.m., was my new alarm clock. I got up, got dressed in the cramped space, and went out into the kitchen, hoping to make a quiet cup of coffee. Brenda was already there, back from a run, glowing with sweat, tapping at her laptop at the new marble island. She didn't look up. "Morning, Eleanor. Coffee's in the pot. I drink it black." I poured a cup. It was bitter. So strong it tasted burnt. "I take mine with milk and a little sugar." I opened the fridge. There was almond milk, oat milk, soy milk, but no regular milk. "Oh," Brenda said, finally looking up. "We don't do dairy. It's inflammatory. There's an oat milk. It's much better for you." I drank the bitter coffee black. On the counter, next to the fancy espresso machine, was a bright yellow post-it note. In Brenda's sharp, all-caps handwriting it said, "Unload dishwasher." Break down Amazon boxes in garage. Wipe down kitchen counters. Let dog out. I stared at it. I'm a bookkeeper. I like lists. My whole life has been organized by them, but this was different. This wasn't a reminder. This was an assignment. Just a few things to help us all get organized while the house is so crazy, Brenda said, her voice full of that false, bright cheer. It's so helpful to have an extra set of hands. I didn't say anything. I did it. I unloaded the dishwasher, stacking her heavy, expensive plates. I went into the cold garage and used a box cutter on the mountain of cardboard from all their new purchases. I wiped down the marble counters, careful not to use the wrong kind of spray. I let their designer breed dog, who barely seemed to notice me, out into the backyard. That night, I was exhausted. The Post-it note was gone. I thought, okay, it's just the move. It's just chaos. It will get better. The next morning, the Post-it was back. Load and run dishwasher. Wait for the cable guy. Window is 1 to 4 p.m. Wipe down baseboards in great room, drywall dust. Take out recycling. And so it began. The Post-it note became my life. After a week, the Post-it was replaced by a sleek white magnetic board stuck to the new stainless steel refrigerator. It was titled, in Brenda's bubbly handwriting, The Family Hub. But it was just a list of chores for me. My role in this family had been defined. I wasn't the matriarch. I wasn't the guest. I was the unpaid help. My days, which used to be my own, filled with reading, walking, and balancing the books for the local church charity, were now dictated by Brenda's list. My world shrank to the size of that white board. My only job that wasn't on the list was watching the kids. This was never asked of me. It was assumed. I'd be in my tiny room, trying to read a book with the laundry thumping on the other side of the wall, and the door would fly open. "Eleanor, thank God you're here," Brenda would say, already in her yoga pants, car keys in hand. "I've got a class in 10 minutes, and the sitter just canceled. You've got the kids, right? Great. Their snacks are in the pantry. Don't let them have the ones in the blue box. Those are the organic ones for school. See you in 2 hours." And she'd be gone. I was no longer grandma. I was the backup sitter. But the worst part, the part that chipped away at my soul, was the food. In my old house, I cooked. I loved to cook. It was how I showed love. David always said my beef stew could solve any problem. One Thursday, it was cold and rainy. The house was finally quiet. The kids were at school, Brenda was at some committee meeting, and Mark was at the office. I decided I would make my stew. I would make a real meal. I found my old, heavy Dutch oven in a box, and I walked to the small, expensive grocery store down the street. I bought real beef, fresh carrots, onions, and a bottle of red wine for the broth. For 3 hours I cooked. The house, which always smelled of new paint and industrial cleaner, finally smelled like a home. It smelled like my past. It smelled like David. The rich, deep aroma of the broth simmering. It was the first time I had felt like Eleanor in months. I was so proud. I set the table. I put the heavy pot on a trivet, the stew dark and rich inside. Brenda and Mark came home, shaking off their umbrellas. "Wow, Mom," Mark said. "Something smells amazing." Brenda walked into the kitchen, sniffed the air, and her face just tightened. She looked at the pot on the table, and her expression was one of absolute disgust. "Eleanor, what is this?" "It's my beef stew," I said, my pride wavering. "Your husband's favorite," I thought. "Oh my God," she said, putting her hand over her mouth. "The smell, it's so heavy." She walked over and picked up the pot. "Brenda, what are you doing?" Mark asked, confused. "Eleanor, we're doing keto," she said, as if I was an idiot. "We don't eat this. Carrots, onions, flour in the gravy. It's just pure carbs and fat. We can't have this in the house." And then she did it. She walked over to the sink, flipped on the garbage disposal, a powerful, roaring one that could chew up bricks, and she tilted the pot. I watched as my stew, 3 hours of my love, my memory of my husband, glugged into the drain. The disposal roared and choked as it tore the tender beef and soft vegetables apart. Whir, gurned, chomp. I just stood there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. "There," she said, slamming the empty pot on the counter. Crisis averted. She turned to Mark. Babe, I'll just order us a couple of bunless burgers. Eleanor, there's probably some salad mix in the fridge for you. Mark just stood there. He looked at the empty pot. He looked at my face, and he did nothing. He said nothing. He just ran a hand through his hair and said, Yeah, okay, burgers sound good, Bren. I turned, walked back to my little room, and closed the door. I could still hear the whir of the disposal as it finished off the last of my husband's stew. I sat on my cot, and I just stared at the wall. My hands were shaking. In a box under my cot was David's hammer, and for one wild, fleeting second, I understood what it felt like to want to break something. Instead, I just sat there, invisible, as the smell of my stew was replaced by the silence of their disapproval. That silence was worse than yelling. Yelling means you still exist. Silence means you're not even worth the breath. After the stew incident, the dynamic in the house shifted. It was a subtle, creeping cold. Brenda stopped treating me like a servant and started treating me like a problem. A piece of furniture that was in the wrong place. And a piece of furniture doesn't have feelings, but it can be confused. And that, I learned, was her new goal. It started with small things, little pinpricks of doubt. I was waiting for a letter from my pension, an important annual statement. I saw the mail truck come and go. Brenda, dear, did the mail come? I asked from my little room. Yes, Eleanor, it's on the counter. She called back, her voice distracted. I went out. The Marble Island was covered in her catalogs, restoration hardware, Pottery Barn, a stack of fitness magazines, but no mail. Not for me. I'm sorry, I don't see it, I said politely. She let out a long, long sigh, the kind you give a child who just can't find their own shoes. Eleanor, I just told you. She walked over, all annoyance, and shuffled her magazines. It's right. Oh, here. Tucked underneath a catalog for outdoor patio furniture was my letter. She slapped it down on the counter. See? You just have to look. She didn't apologize. The implication was clear. I was careless. I was blind. A few days later, it was the thermostat. My little room was right next to the laundry, and the wall it shared with the garage was uninsulated. It was freezing. I was constantly cold, wearing 2 pairs of socks and David's old, thick-knit wool cardigan over my clothes, just to sit and read. The smart home thermostat, which Brenda controlled from her phone, was always set to a frigid 68 degrees. One afternoon when everyone was out, I walked over and quietly bumped it up to 70. Just 2 degrees. Just enough to feel my fingers again. An hour later, I walked by. It was back at 68. I thought maybe the programming had kicked in. I bumped it up again. 70. That evening, Brenda found me in the kitchen. She wasn't angry. She had that concerned look on her face, the one that made my stomach drop. Eleanor, honey, are you touching the thermostat? She asked, her voice low and gentle. I was just a little cold, dear. I only moved it a tiny bit. She shook her head, like she was disappointed. You can't do that. The system is all automated. It's connected to the app. When you press the buttons manually, it confuses the sensors. You're going to break it if you keep messing with it. Oh, I said. I had no idea. Besides, she said, looking at me with that clinical pity, the house is programmed to 72 degrees. It is 72. You really shouldn't be feeling that cold. Maybe you should. I don't know. Get your circulation checked? We're just worried you're not feeling well. I felt my cheeks burn. I knew what 70 degrees felt like. And I knew the house was not 72. But she said it with such authority. She had the app. I just had my feelings. I was an old, cold woman. She was a modern, technological wife. I retreated. I went back to my room and put on another pair of socks. I started to wonder, it was something wrong with me? But the true masterpiece, the final turn of the screw, happened a week later. It was a Friday, my one day a week to get out of the house. I volunteered to do the bookkeeping for my old church's food pantry. It's the one place I still feel like Eleanor Vance bookkeeper. I feel competent. I feel useful. I was getting ready to leave. I went to the hook by my door where I always hang my purse. Every single night for 30 years, I have put my keys and my purse in the same spot. It wasn't there. I felt a small, cold jolt of panic. It was my old, structured leather purse, the one David gave me. It had my wallet, my checkbook, my keys, my entire life in it. That's strange, I mumbled. I checked my room. I checked under the cot. I walked out and checked the kitchen counter. Nothing. I checked the laundry room. Nothing. The panic was rising. It wasn't just the inconvenience, it was the fact of it. I never lose my purse. "Brenda," I called out. My voice was trembling a little. "Have you seen my purse?" Brenda was at the kitchen island with Mark. They were looking at tile samples. She didn't look up. "Probably wherever you left it, Eleanor. But I always leave it on the hook," I said, my voice getting higher. "It's not there. The black leather one." Brenda let out a sigh so loud and so full of martyrdom that Mark finally looked up from the tile. "Honestly, Eleanor," she said, as if I was the world's biggest burden. She stood up, rubbing her temples. "You'd lose your head if it wasn't screwed on." And then she did the strangest thing. She didn't look where I had looked. She walked straight to the kitchen pantry, the big walk-in one. She opened the door. She reached inside, behind a 20-pound bag of rice, and pulled out my black leather purse. She turned around, holding it between two fingers, as if it were contaminated. She wasn't angry, she wasn't annoyed, she was sad. Her face was a mask of pure, devastating pity. "Eleanor, you left this in the pantry. Again." My blood turned to ice. I did not. I would never put my purse in the pantry. I've never." "Honey," she said, cutting me off, her voice a soft, clinical whisper. "This is the third time this week." It was a lie. It was a cold, bald, terrifying lie, but she said it with such certainty. She looked over at Mark, who was now standing in the kitchen doorway. His face wasn't angry. It was worried. He was looking at me, his mother, as if I were a stranger, as if I were a ghost. "Eleanor," Brenda continued, walking toward me, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Are you feeling all right? You seem so forgetful lately." She put her hand on my arm. Her touch felt like a spider. "You're confusing things," she whispered. "You're forgetting our conversations. You're leaving your purse in the pantry, with all your money in it. Mark and I are we're getting worried about you." I looked at my purse in her hand. I knew as certainly as I knew my own name, that I had not put it there. But how do you argue with that? How do you fight an accusation that's disguised as concern? If I yelled, I'd sound crazy. If I cried, I'd seem unstable. If I argued, I'd sound defensive. I'd sound exactly like a confused old woman would. She had me. She had pinned me to the wall with her sympathy. I looked at Mark. His face was a mask of fear. He believed her. Of course he believed her. He wanted a new, perfect life in his new, perfect house. A forgetful mother who confused things was a problem. It was a crack in his perfect new foundation. Brenda wasn't just taking away my room or my food. She was taking away my mind. She was taking away my credibility. And she was doing it right in front of my son, planting the seed. Mom's not well. Mom's a liability. Mom needs help. I just stared at her. I couldn't speak. I just slowly reached out and took my purse from her hand. I'm sorry, I whispered. It was all I could do. "I don't know what's wrong with me today. I'm just tired." "Of course you are, sweetie," she said, patting my arm. Her eyes were triumphant. "Don't you worry about a thing. We'll take care of you." I walked back to my room, my purse clutched to my chest. My blood was running cold. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This was a war, and I had just realized she wasn't just trying to make me miserable. She was trying to have me declared incompetent. She was building a case, and I knew exactly where that case ended. I knew where that case ended. It ended in a quiet, clean room with a lock on the outside. It ended with me, confused and forgetful, being erased. After the pantry incident, I changed. On the outside, I was the same quiet, helpful Eleanor. I unloaded the dishwasher. I walked the dog. I smiled my small, watery smile. But on the inside, a different part of me had woken up. The bookkeeper. The auditor. The part of my brain that doesn't just accept the numbers, but interrogates them. I was no longer a victim. I was an observer. My invisibility, the very thing she used as a weapon, now became my camouflage. I made a point of showing her where I put my purse. "Just setting my purse on the hook, dear," I'd say. my voice light. I'd watch her smile, a tiny, tight little flicker as I ruined her next gotcha moment. I double-checked the thermostat. I took pictures of it with my old smartphone when no one was looking. 68 degrees. I started a private little log, in a tiny notebook I kept in my sock drawer. A ledger of my own sanity. The house was no longer a home, it was a cold observation deck. I watched Brenda pace the new hardwood floors, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice a low, angry hiss as she walked into the other room. I watched Mark. He couldn't look me in the eye anymore. He'd come home from work, give a general, "Hey everybody," and retreat to his new office over the garage, the in-law suite I was supposed to have. He looked guilty. He looked trapped. He looked weak. And I realized, with a cold, sinking feeling, that I couldn't count on my son. He wasn't her partner, he was her first victim. Then, one Tuesday, the house was quiet. For once, the laundry wasn't thumping. The kids were at school. Brenda was at her yoga class, and I was in my room, mending a pair of my own socks. And then, I heard them. Mark must have come home early. They were in the master bedroom, directly above my little box. Their voices were muffled, but the tone was sharp. Brenda's voice, tight and clear with rage. "I can't do this anymore, Mark. I am suffocating. She is just underfoot all the time. I walk into my own kitchen, and she's just there." Then Mark's voice, lower, weaker. The placating rumble. "What do you want me to do, Bren? She's my mother. We can't just—" "She's not your mother, she's a problem." Brenda's voice was rising, and I could hear her footsteps pacing back and forth. Back and forth. "She's confused. She's a liability. What if she leaves the stove on? What if she falls and sues us? We have to be practical, Mark. I am this close to just making the call myself." "The call? What?" "To Oakwood. I'm doing it. I'm done. I want my house back." The fight stopped. A door slammed. The silence that fell was heavier and more terrifying than the shouting. I sat on my cot, the sock and needle falling into my lap. Oakwood. The name meant nothing, and it meant everything. A decision had been made. That night, I couldn't sleep. The laundry machine was running again, a late-night load, and the thumping vibrated in my bones. I felt cold. So cold. I got up, thinking a warm glass of not milk, a warm glass of water might help. I padded out into the dark kitchen. The only light was the blue glow from the new microwave. And on the new stainless steel refrigerator, the family hub whiteboard, with my list of chores for tomorrow, was gleaming. Under the board was a magnetic clip Brenda used for urgent papers, permission slips for the kids, coupons for that keto meal delivery service. And tucked behind a coupon was a folded, glossy, trifold pamphlet. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely pull it free. The paper was thick, expensive, and smooth. The cover had a photograph of a smiling, white-haired couple, the woman holding a paintbrush, the man holding a book. They were on a pristine, sun-drenched lawn. The name, in elegant green script, was Oakwood Meadows, a new chapter in gracious living. I opened it. Gracious living. The words mocked me. Inside were photos of bright hotel-like rooms, a vibrant community, a chef-prepared dining experience. This wasn't just a thought. This wasn't an idea she was floating. This was research. This was planning. I turned to the back flap, and my blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. It was a separate inserted page, a price list, assisted living, level 1, assisted living, level 2, enhanced care, memory care suite. And next to level 2, in Brenda's neat, bubbly, all-caps handwriting, was a circled monthly fee, a number with 4 zeros after it. Underneath it, she had done a little calculation. She had written Ease SS, my social security, and a number, then a minus sign, and then a large, final number, underlined twice. The amount they would have to pay, out of pocket, every month, to keep me locked away. She wasn't just planning to get rid of me. She was budgeting for it. The gaslighting, the stew, the attic. That was all emotional. That was cruelty. This was a transaction. This was an eviction notice from the family. They were pricing me out of my own life after I had funded theirs. I stood there in the dark, in the kitchen I had paid for, and I felt the last little flickering ember of Mom die. It was replaced by something cold, hard, and perfectly clear. Eleanor Vance, bookkeeper. I looked at the calculation again. The ledger was no longer just unbalanced, it was fraudulent. She had taken my love, my grief for my husband, my desperate need for family, and turned it into an asset on her balance sheet. And now, I was a liability she was trying to write off. I folded the brochure. I put it back in the clip. I didn't take it. I wanted her to know I had seen it. No, not yet. I put it back, exactly as it was. This was my information now. I went back to my room. The thumping of the laundry was the only sound. It was the sound of a clock, ticking. I knelt by my cot. I pulled out my old, worn accordion file, the one with all my important papers, my bungalow's closing statement, my pension documents, David's death certificate. And right in the front, in its own crisp, clear sleeve, was the notarized, signed copy of the promissory note. I thought of David's hammer, sitting in a box, useless and dusty in the dark attic. He was a builder. He built our life, our home. But a hammer isn't just for building, it's for demolition. It's for pulling out the nails that are bent and wrong, the ones that don't hold. I pulled the note out. My hands were perfectly steady. I read Section 4B, the clause I had typed, the formality. I looked at my phone. 2:17 a.m. I sat on my cot, in the cold, dark room, the document in my lap. I didn't sleep. I just waited for the bank to open. I waited for the dawn. At 9:01 a.m., I was out of the house. I told them I was going for a walk. I sat on a bench in the cold, sterile, master-planned community park. I used my cell phone. I dialed a number I had found online for a law firm downtown. A polite voice answered. "Good morning, Miller, Hayes and Associates." My voice, when it came out, was quiet. It was calm. It was not the voice of a confused old woman. It was the voice of a creditor. "Hello. My name is Eleanor Vance. I need to schedule a consultation with a foreclosure attorney." "Yes. It's regarding a private loan. And the borrower is in default." My lawyer's name was Mr. Hayes. He was a quiet, no-nonsense man in a crisp suit, about my age. He didn't offer sympathy, he offered clarity. He looked at my promissory note, my bank statements showing the transfer, and the little ledger I had kept. He read Section 4B. A very small, very thin smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Mrs. Vance, your late husband was a very smart man," he said. "This is not just a document, this is a fortress. You are in a position of remarkable strength. The breach of contract is clear. The in-law suite was a verbal but provable condition of the loan, and their attempt to move you to a facility which you overheard is a clear, hostile act. You are well within your rights to call the note." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means," he said, "that they have 30 days to pay you $150,000, plus interest, and if they can't," he steepled his fingers, "the house, which that money secured, goes into foreclosure. And since you are the sole lien holder, you get the house." For the next 2 weeks, I was the perfect, invisible old woman. The Family Hub whiteboard was my guide. I unloaded the dishwasher. I took out the recycling. I waited for the Amazon packages. I smiled my vacant, pleasant smile. I was no longer a victim. I was a creditor. And I was simply waiting for the accounts to be due. Brenda, for her part, mistook my silence for defeat. She thought her gaslighting had worked, that I had retreated so far into my confusion that I was no longer a threat. She became magnanimous. She would pat my arm as she passed. "Doing okay today, Eleanor? Need anything?" It was the condescending kindness of a zookeeper toward a harmless animal that was about to be transferred. She even stopped hiding the Oakwood brochure. It was just left out on the counter, a silent, screaming threat. The perfect moment, my lawyer advised, would be the moment I served them the official certified papers. "You want a clear, documented start to the 30-day clock," he'd said. I knew exactly when that moment would be. 2 weeks to the day, a Saturday, was the party. Mark had gotten a promotion, a big one, and Brenda was throwing a backyard barbecue to celebrate. It was, of course, a full-on catered event. This wasn't hot dogs and potato salad. This was a 12-hour smoked brisket from an expensive pitmaster downtown. This was craft beer in silver tubs. This was kale and quinoa salad. The backyard, which had been a muddy construction pit, was now a masterpiece of modern farmhouse landscaping. Gray stone patio, a huge outdoor fireplace, and a gleaming stainless steel outdoor kitchen that probably cost more than my first car. And Brenda was the queen of it all. She was wearing a white linen dress that I knew cost a fortune, her hair perfect, a glass of white wine in her hand. She glided from group to group, her laugh loud and bright, touching arms, introducing Mark to neighbors I'd never even seen. "This is my husband, Mark, the new vice president," she'd trill. "And this is our new outdoor kitchen." We just loved to entertain. I watched her. I watched her showing off the marble countertops, the built-in wine fridge. I paid for that, I thought, as I quietly cleared a plate from the table. Mark was beside her, looking proud and flushed, a beer in his hand. He was the man of the hour. He was accepting congratulations, telling some story about a big deal he'd closed. He caught my eye once, as I was picking up a stray napkin. He gave me a quick, almost guilty little nod, and then turned right back to the circle of laughing neighbors. My role, of course, was clear. I was the help. I was the quiet, gray-haired woman in the background, making sure the trash was emptied and the dip bowls were full. I didn't mind. I did it with a quiet efficiency. I moved through the clusters of people, their conversations about school districts, property taxes, and their upcoming trips to Napa washing over me. "Brenda, your house is divine," one woman said, the one with the huge diamond ring. "You have such an eye. That kitchen—" "Oh, thank you," Brenda said, brushing it off as if it were nothing. "We were just so lucky to get this house. It was a steal. We just had to put a lot of work into it." My hand, which was reaching for a damp coaster, paused. A steal. That's what I was. A steal. I continued my rounds. I kept my smile small and pleasant. I was the ghost at the feast. I refilled the ice. I restocked the craft beer. I listened as Mark told his boss. "Yeah, we've got a great setup here. My mom's even living with us. It's really working out for everyone." He said it with such casual confidence, as if he were a good, dutiful son. About an hour into the party, the music lulled. Brenda was standing near the outdoor fireplace, the center of the largest group, telling a story. I was standing near the patio table, which was laden with food. Brenda, without looking away from her audience, noticed the chip bowl was empty. She spotted me. Her hand, the one without the wine glass, shot out, holding the heavy, artisan-crafted wooden bowl. She didn't call my name. She just snapped her fingers. A short, sharp snap, the kind you use to call a dog. She thrust the bowl in my direction, her eyes still locked on her neighbor. "Eleanor," she said, her voice a low, annoyed command. "Could you please go refill the chip bowl? The avocado dip is running low too. Get on that." The small circle of people went quiet, waiting for the help to move. I didn't move. I didn't take the bowl. I just stood there, my hands clasped in front of my own clean, simple apron. I looked at her. The silence stretched. It became awkward. Her arm was still out, holding the bowl. She finally, slowly, turned her head to look at me, her smile freezing on her face, her eyes narrowing. "Eleanor, did you hear me?" I smiled. A real smile. A calm, polite, bookkeeper's smile. It stopped her. She wasn't used to me smiling at her. She was used to me smiling past her. My voice, when it came out, wasn't a whisper. It was clear. It was firm. It carried in the sudden, afternoon quiet. "In a moment, dear." I reached into my apron pocket. I pulled out a crisp, white, certified mail envelope. "First," I said, my voice pleasant, as if I were offering her a canapé, "I have something for you and Mark, a little promotion gift." I stepped forward and placed the envelope in her hand, right on top of the empty chip bowl. Brenda stared at the certified envelope, her arm still extended, the heavy wooden chip bowl dangling from her fingers. The patio, which had been buzzing with laughter and the clink of glasses, went utterly silent. You could hear the sizzle of the brisket in the outdoor kitchen. You could hear a neighbor's lawnmower 2 streets over. Mark's boss, a man with a silver watch, cleared his throat. Brenda's smile was a rictus, a painted-on grimace. "Eleanor," she hissed, her voice a low, furious whisper. "Not now. We have guests. Go put this, whatever it is, in your room." She tried to shove the envelope back at me. I didn't take it. I just kept my hands clasped at my apron. "I insist you open it, dear," I said. My voice was calm and light, but it carried. "It's time-sensitive." The neighbor with the diamond ring, the one who had just called my house divine, took a small, sharp intake of breath. She didn't move, but her eyes were glued to us. Brenda's face flushed a deep, ugly red. She knew she was trapped. She couldn't make a scene, not in front of these people. She snatched the envelope from my hand, her knuckles white. With a final venomous look, she tore it open. The sound of the paper ripping was like a gunshot in the quiet. I watched her. I didn't watch the paper. I watched her. I've read ledgers my whole life. I know how to read a person's face as the numbers compute. First, confusion. Her brow furrowed as she scanned the legal letterhead: Miller, Hayes, and Associates. Second, annoyance. She thought it was junk mail, a solicitation. Third, the freeze. Her eyes stopped. They locked onto a single paragraph. Her mouth fell open. The color drained from her face, leaving her expensive spray tan looking orange and waxy. The wine glass in her hand trembled, sloshing Pinot Grigio onto her fingers. The chip bowl fell from her other hand, hitting the gray stone patio with a loud, hollow thud. A few stray tortilla chips scattered across the stones. No one moved to pick them up. "What?" she whispered. It was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, not with anger but with a raw animal confusion. "What is this?" "Notice of default." She said the last word like it was in a foreign language. Mark, who had been laughing with his boss, finally noticed the absolute stillness of the party. He saw the chip bowl on the ground. He saw his wife's face. He hurried over, his smile strained. "Bren, what's wrong? What's going on? Mom, what did you do?" Brenda didn't seem to hear him. She was still staring at me, the paper shaking in her hand. "Is this a joke?" My son turned to me, his voice sharp. "Mom, what is this?" I took a breath. I felt the cold, hard floor of my tiny room. I felt the thumping of the laundry machine against my wall. I saw the Oakwood Meadows brochure, with my life calculated away in Brenda's bubbly handwriting. I looked at my son, the boy who had watched me, his mother, be erased, and who had done nothing. The ghost in the utility closet was gone. The bookkeeper was here. My voice when it came out was not the voice he knew. It was not the whisper of the invisible woman. It was clear. It was cold. It was the voice of a creditor. "It's not a joke, Mark. It's an accounting term." I turned my full attention to Brenda. "You've defaulted on our loan agreement." The silence on the patio was now so heavy it was suffocating. The neighbor with the diamond ring looked at her husband. Brenda finally found her voice. It was a high-pitched screech. "A loan? What loan? We don't have a loan with you." She started to laugh, a hysterical, sharp sound. "She's lost it, Mark. She's completely lost it. She thinks we owe her $150,000, I said, my voice cutting through her laughter like a knife. Mark froze. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the down payment for this house," I said, projecting my voice just enough for the surrounding neighbors to hear clearly. "I didn't give you that money. I lent it to you. It was a private loan." Brenda's laugh caught in her throat. That's a lie. There was no loan. It was a gift." "Then what?" I asked. "Did you both sign at the closing?" I looked at Mark. His face went pale. I saw his eyes flicker. He remembered. He remembered the paper. He remembered signing it. That was nothing," Brenda sputtered, grabbing Mark's arm. "That was just some formality. Some bookkeeping nonsense you do. It wasn't. It wasn't real." "It's real, Brenda," I said, my voice as cold as the marble island in her kitchen. "It was notarized. It's a legally binding contract. And you just defaulted." "Defaulted how?" Mark yelled, finally finding his voice. He was angry, but it was the anger of fear. We're paying the mortgage. Brenda was shaking her head, holding the paper out. "It's insane, Mark. She's insane." She looked at me, her eyes filling with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. You tricked us." "No, dear," I said, adjusting the apron I would never wear again. "I'm a bookkeeper. I just read the fine print. And you never did." "You just never read the fine print," I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through the patio's silence. "You just signed." Brenda was still shaking her head, the certified letter rattling in her grip. "This is insane. It's extortion. We'll sue you. Mark, tell her. Tell her she's crazy." Mark finally found his words, trying to sound like the reasonable new vice president. "Mom, stop this. This is not funny. We pay our bills. We haven't defaulted on anything. What are you even talking about?" He was appealing to the neighbors, to his boss, trying to paint me as the confused old woman. The very role Brenda had written for me. This was it. The moment the audit was presented. "You're right, Mark," I said, my voice carrying over the patio, silencing his. "You are paying the bank's mortgage. You're just not paying me. We don't owe you payments." Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're correct," I said. "It wasn't that kind of loan. It was a simple balloon note. But there was a clause, a covenant. My husband, David, used to put them in all his business contracts. He was a builder. He knew that some partners can't be trusted." I looked directly at Brenda. Her eyes were wide. "It's Section 4B, I said. The neighbor with the diamond ring leaned forward, just a fraction. "Section 4B, I repeated, as if reading from the document itself. "It states that the loan, the $150,000 for the down payment, was contingent upon the lender, that's me, Eleanor Vance, being provided with the agreed-upon residence for the duration of her natural life." Brenda's face went blank. "Agreed upon? What?" "The in-law suite over the garage, dear," I said, my voice still light. "The one with the separate entrance and the little kitchen. The one you promised me, to get me to sell my home. The one that is currently your husband's home office." Mark looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Mom, that was just... plans changed. We needed the space for my Zoom calls." "I'm not finished," I said. I held up one hand. The ghost from the laundry room was now holding court. "The clause also states that the entire loan becomes due, payable in full, immediately, should any action be taken by the borrowers to remove me from that residence or from the property entirely, against my will." I let that hang in the air. The only sound was the sizzling of the brisket. Brenda, in her white linen dress, was now the color of chalk. She knew I had seen it. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but the lie was dead on her lips. "The Peloton room. Brenda," I asked. "The plan you told me about? The one to move me to the attic? That was the first breach, but I was willing to let that slide. I thought, she's just being cruel. But then, I found the budget." "Budget?" Mark asked, turning his head slowly to look at his wife. "What budget?" I looked at Brenda, and for the first time, I think she truly saw me. Not as an old, forgetful burden, but as the person who had seen her numbers. "The Oakwood Meadows brochure, dear. The new chapter in Gracious Living. The one you left on the kitchen counter. The one with the price list for the memory care suite. The one where you circled the monthly fee and did a little calculation. Ease SS my Social Security minus the cost. The one where you were budgeting to have me put away." There was a collective, sharp intake of breath from the neighbors. The woman with the diamond ring actually put her hand to her mouth. Mark's boss just stared, his face a mask of stone. Mark turned, his whole body to face his wife. "Brenda? What is she talking about? Oakwood." "She's lying," Brenda shrieked. "She's a crazy, bitter old woman. She's making it all up." "Am I?" I asked. "Then why is the brochure, with your handwriting all over it, in the kitchen junk drawer, second from the top? Why did you tell Mark just last Tuesday that I was a liability and you were making the call?" Mark's face crumpled. He remembered the fight. He knew. "You didn't just break a promise, Brenda," I said, my voice dropping. "You committed fraud. You planned an eviction. You breached the contract. You defaulted." I took the now empty apron off. I folded it, neat and square, like a finished ledger. "So, I'm calling the loan." I looked at Mark, my son. "You have 30 days to pay me back the full $150,000, plus the contractual interest." Brenda let out a sound, a half sob, half scream. We don't have $150,000. You know that. It's in the house. I know, I said. And then the final, beautiful, terrible piece of math. So, if you can't pay me, you'll have to sell. Or my lawyer, Mr. Hayes, will begin foreclosure proceedings on. Let's see. What's today? Oh, yes. 31 days from now. Foreclosure, Mark said, his voice cracking. Mom, you wouldn't. You'd be kicking us out. No, Mark, I said, and I placed my folded apron on the table next to the bowl of avocado dip. You're a bookkeeper's son. You know how this works. I'm not kicking you out. I'm just balancing the books. The silence that fell on that patio was absolute. It was a heavy, cold vacuum, sucking all the air and laughter out of the backyard. The party was over. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of the craft beer tap that no one was using, and the distant, cheerful music from a neighbor's house, a life that wasn't imploding. Brenda stood there, the certified letter clutched in her hand. Her face was a mask of disbelief and pure, undiluted hatred. The neighbors, the new, wealthy friends, the ones she was so desperate to impress, were frozen. They were all staring, but not at me. They were staring at her. She had been exposed, not just as a bad hostess, but as a cruel, calculating thief. The woman with the diamond ring, the one who had admired the house, took a half step back, pulling her husband's arm. Her face wasn't sympathetic. It was disgusted. She looked at Brenda as if she had just found a worm in her salad. Brenda's eyes darted around, looking for an ally. There were none. She was on an island of her own making, and the tide was coming in. You, she finally choked out, her voice a low, trembling hiss. She took a step toward me. You bitch. You planned this. You bitter old. Brenda. The voice was cold. It was Mark's boss, the man with the silver watch. He hadn't moved, but his face was like stone. He was looking at his new vice president. Mark, he said, his voice flat. I think my wife and I will be going. He didn't say great party. He didn't say congratulations. Dennis, wait, Mark started, taking a step toward him, his hand out. We'll talk on Monday, Mark, the boss said. It wasn't a promise. It was a threat. He and his wife turned and walked, not to the front door, but straight across the new, expensive sod of the lawn and out the side gate. That's all it took. The spell was broken. It was an exodus. No one said goodbye. No one made excuses about the time. They just left. In twos and threes, they grabbed their purses and their jackets, their faces carefully blank. They avoided looking at Mark. They especially avoided looking at Brenda. They just wanted to get away, to get the stink of this off them. In less than 2 minutes, the entire party, all her new, important friends, all of Mark's colleagues had evaporated. The only things left were the half-eaten trays of expensive brisket, the tubs of melting ice, and the three of us. Me, standing by the patio table, my hands clasped. Brenda, frozen by the fireplace, the legal notice still in her hand. And Mark watched his boss's car pull away. He watched his new life, his promotion, his social standing, all of it, drive off down the street. He stood there for a long, terrible moment. I could see the muscles in his jaw working. I could see the veins on his neck. He was a man in a pressure cooker, and the lid had just blown off. He turned, very, very slowly. Not to me, to Brenda. You. The word was not a word. It was a roar. It was so loud I flinched. You! He screamed, and he finally moved, stabbing his finger at her. You did this. Me! Brenda shrieked, finding her voice. She's the one who... No, Mark was almost unrecognizable. This wasn't my weak, complicit son. This was a cornered animal. I told you, from the beginning, I told you to just be nice to her. That's all you had to do. Just be nice. I was nice. Nice. You treated her like a servant. You poured her food in the garbage. You put her in a closet. I told you, Bren, don't push it. I told you, she gave us everything. But you couldn't stop, could you? You couldn't just be happy. Happy, she screamed back, her face twisted. I'm not the one who signed that stupid paper. You're the one who's weak. You were too weak to stand up to her then, and you're too weak to stand up to her now. You let her do this to us. I let her. You were the one with the brochures, the Oakwood brochures. You were budgeting to get rid of my mother. She was in the way. She paid for the way. It was ugly. It was raw. They were just tearing at each other. All the greed and resentment and weakness that had been festering under the modern farmhouse exterior now laid bare on the expensive gray patio stones. I just stood and watched. The bookkeeper. The auditor. I had presented my findings. The company was now liquidating itself. Brenda finally crumpled. She threw the letter on the ground. It doesn't matter. We're ruined. We're ruined. It's over. She collapsed onto one of her new beige outdoor sofas, the one I wasn't allowed to sit on, and she put her face in her hands. Her sobs were dry, angry, and hopeless. The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of a battlefield after the battle. Mark just stood there, his chest heaving. His rage was spent. He looked broken. He had lost his wife, his house, and his job, all in the span of about 10 minutes. He slowly, finally, turned to me. I was the only one left. The last person. The one with the power. His face, when he looked at me, was a ruin. It was the face of the little boy who had fallen off his bike and skinned his knee. It was the face of the teenager who had failed his driving test. It was the face of my son. "Mom," he whispered. His voice was cracked. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about the brochure. I wouldn't have. I never would have let that happen." He took a step toward me. Then another. He looked down at the ground. I knew she was hard on you. I knew it was wrong. I didn't know what to do. I was a coward." He looked up, and his eyes were full of tears, real tears, not of rage, of shame. "Mom, please, don't do this. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He was begging. My son, the new vice president, was standing on his ruined patio, begging his mother, the ghost from the laundry room, to save him. I looked at him. I felt a deep, aching sadness. Not anger. Just a profound sense of loss. "Sorry for what, Mark?" I asked. My voice was quiet. It wasn't angry. It was just tired. "Are you sorry for not reading the contract? Are you sorry for letting Brenda dump my stew in the garbage disposal? Are you sorry for letting her convince you I was confused?" I took a small breath. "Are you sorry you stood there, in my bedroom, and agreed to move me to the attic? For an exercise bike?" He flinched at every word. He had no answer. He just shook his head, the tears rolling down his face. "Please, Mom, please." "I'm not Mom right now, Mark," I said, and I picked up my folded apron. "I'm the lien holder, and the ledger is unbalanced." I turned and walked toward the house, my steps sure and steady on the stone. "The clock is ticking," I said without looking back. "You have 30 days. You have 30 days. 30 days is not a lot of time to find $150,000 when your credit is overextended and your entire social circle just watched you get exposed as a fraud. They couldn't sell the house in time. They couldn't get a second mortgage. They couldn't pay. The day the clock ran out, my lawyer was very efficient. The foreclosure was uncontested. The house, the one my money had secured, the one my husband's memory was stored in, it was now legally mine, all of it. The following Saturday, there were movers at the house again. But this time, they weren't moving in new, beige furniture. They were moving it out. Brenda, it turned out, didn't like being on the losing side. She didn't like being poor. She took the restoration hardware sofa, the Peloton, the outdoor kitchen, and the shiny SUV. She signed the papers Mr. Hayes put in front of her, transferring her share of the debt to Mark in exchange for a clean break. She left. She didn't say goodbye to me. She didn't even say goodbye to her husband. She just evaporated. And Mark is still here. Today, I'm sitting in the great room, drinking my coffee, with real milk and 1 spoon of sugar. The room is mostly empty, vast and echoing. My new fridge is full of things I like to eat. I've moved my things out of the utility closet. I sleep in the master bedroom now, the one with the walk-in closet and the big sunny windows. And the in-law suite over the garage? It's my new office, my bookkeeping office. It's quiet, and I have a lovely view of the trees. The utility closet by the laundry room, the little gray box, that's Mark's room now. He's my tenant. He hands me a check on the 1st of the month, for rent. He came into the great room this morning, his eyes red. He's quiet these days. He unloads the dishwasher without a list. He takes out the recycling. He's learning. Mom, he said, his voice quiet. The movers are here. The last one. I nodded. Send them up. I watched as 2 men, grunting and sweating, carefully navigated the main staircase. They were carrying something down from the attic, something old and brown and patterned. It was David's armchair. Where do you want it, ma'am? One of them asked. I pointed to the very center of the vast, empty room, right in the middle of the expensive rug Brenda had left behind. They set it down. It looked magnificent. It was defiant. It didn't match a single thing. It clashed with the gray walls and the cold modern fireplace. It was my home. I walked over and sat down in it. The cushion sighed, conforming to my shape. It was the first time I'd been comfortable in this house. Mark stood in the doorway, watching me. He looked like a little boy, lost in a house that was no longer his. Mark, I said, my voice soft. He looked up. Yes, Mom. The family hub whiteboard on the fridge. It's grubby. Please, go wipe it clean. He just nodded. Yes, Mom. He didn't get what he deserved. He got what he earned. Brenda learned that family isn't a word you use to get what you want. Mark is learning that sorry isn't just a word you say, it's a thing you do. It's an action, paid back over time. And me? I learned that my silence was never weakness. It was just me, waiting, observing, and balancing the books. What do you think? Did Brenda get what she deserved? And should Eleanor ever truly forgive Mark? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the hardest of times.